problem is that the world is caught in experience repetition. We're all repeating the same thoughts and beliefs and organizing the same experiences for ourselves. And as a result of that, our lives become a kind of, and the world itself becomes a sort of Groundhog's Day experience where things just keep repeating. We have the same relationship struggles, we have the same work struggles, we have the same struggles with our kids, we have the same patterns repeating over and over again. And traditionally, this has been, people have tried to address this through, learning to think, expand the way you think, and have different perspectives, and learn to stand in the other person's shoes, that sort of thing. And for some extent, that's worked. However, because the cognitive processes are happening in such a small part of our nervous system in our brains, or wherever they're happening, somewhere, the effect of those thoughts are helpful only to a point. And after that, they become simply ideas or wishful thinking or philosophy or something. Because when what happens is that the beliefs and the thoughts and the my lived experience in the world is happening in experience in how things occur, not on what I tell myself about how things occur. And this internal dialogue, the second voice, while that's extremely useful to some extent as an explainer, an interpreter, a mechanism for giving me other perspectives and all the things that does, it isn't enough engaged with my nervous system to change my experience. So what happens is I have some different ideas about how to do things. I try to do them. I try to speak less, non-violently, or I try to be more accepting and less judgmental and all these kinds of things. And in trying, which is a mental thing, to some extent that works, except under stress. As soon as I'm stressed, my ability to exercise, what some people would probably call the higher function, defaults onto more automatic responses. And then that's where the extreme case of that, of course, is the repetition. We see that in reactivity, that under stress we regress and we start to do automatic patterns of behavior that are designed to keep us safe. So that repetition, that experience repetition, that a lot of us refer to as a reaction, that type of thing, or repetition compulsion as another example, that type of thing keeps us locked into a world that's repeating with the same political problems and the same type of wars. And now we see a similar situation to what we had in World War II. Now the world has dreamt itself up, to have this problem once again. And this type of repetition, a lot of people will, of course, say that, well, that's human nature. That's the way people are. People are inherently selfish, and people are inherently out for themselves, and we've all got to look out for number one. At least that's a lot of the American philosophy, conservative philosophy. But this repetition that looks like human nature is more a habit, a stress reaction habit, for lack of a better words, right in the moment. And that stress reaction habit, that experience repetition, makes it look like, indeed, that is the way people are, and indeed that's the way the world is, and progress is painfully, painfully slow. However, if you take a moment to really hear what I'm saying, you might, and to investigate within yourself, you might notice that part of the way that you and I and the world keeps that pattern in place is that we look for what we already believe. We have confirmation bias. So the experience repetition creates a consciousness, and not exactly a consciousness, let me put that, an awareness is what I mean. It creates a pattern of awareness and a pattern of attention, that's what I wanted to say. It creates a pattern of attention. That pattern of attention pulls awarenesses, pulls things up in the environment that support what we already believe about people, about countries, about companies, about leadership, about employees, about managers, about teams. And when we do that, when we get the attention selecting for what we already believe, what essentially what we're doing is we're having a mechanism that is looking for the past. Because actually I know how this works. I handled this in the last company. I can solve it now in this company because that's how I did it in the last one. And that, when we look to the past as our pattern for the future, our future becomes our past. We're starting to recreate those patterns of behavior, and we're templating our future on our past. Our future is our past. We're locked. We're locked in, and the world is locked in. It's the same thing, what's happening with our personal relationships. We repeat the same things over and over again. I don't know if you've had a intimate relationship where you both start to repeat the same things. And you say it louder, you say it with more emphasis, you say it gentler, you look for the right moment. You do all these things to keep repeating because you're locked into a certain pattern of perception, a certain belief, and the other person is locked into theirs. And suddenly we're at an impasse. And that's the same thing that happens with founders of companies. They get or leadership teams, senior leadership teams. You get or a board of directors. You get people locked in to their perspective about how they experience the world and what they believe. And of course, they believe it because why? Not so much because of the cognitive element, not so much because of what they're thinking. I mean, that plays a big role, of course. A lot of people are attached to their thoughts, no doubt, most of them are. But what I'm trying to get at here is there's a deeper level. It's an emotional level, and there's the experiential level. You see, they believe it because that's the way they experience the world. And I can try to talk you out of anything that you're doing, or anything you believe, but as long as you experience the world as occurring that way, and you do that repeatedly, it repeatedly shows up that in fact the world is this way. People are just out for themselves, and you've seen it now again and again and again. And people, if you give them a foot, they take a yard, and if you don't keep them busy, and if you don't keep them motivated, you don't set up some matrix where they're motivated to go to the next level, they'll just be lazy and won't do anything. If you have all those kinds of beliefs in place, and the world occurs to you that way, well, of course, under stress, you're going to go for those tried and true things that you know happen, that you've experienced. You know it to be because of the experience. And this is the point I'm trying to get to you today with Goodlander Experience Training. The reason experience is in the title is because it's not the cognitive layer that's the problem. It's the experiential layer that's the problem in the world and the problem in our relationships. And the reason why we're not more creative in relating to each other and in defining satisfaction and joy, it's because we're locked into these kinds of repetitions. And if the world wasn't, if we weren't experiencing the world that way, if our feelings weren't getting hurt with our intimate relationships, and if we didn't get fired from the job, or if we didn't hire the guy to be head of X and have, and find out that he's a complete imposter and so forth, if those experiences didn't happen, the way we, the way we think they happened, but the way we experienced them as happening. That's really the point, right? It's not about the thinking, it's about the experience. If I didn't experience that as happening, I wouldn't believe it. But my feelings have been hurt. I've hired people that have betrayed me. These things have happened, and when things occur to us in that way and there are consequences, that's very hard to believe, that somehow that wasn't actually the case, that there were other choices there, that there are multi-levels of reality and outcomes and choices that could have been made, because that's what happened. That's the way the memory is formed. So if we're going to solve our interpersonal problems, and this is the message of Goodlander Experience Training and what I'm trying to bring to people, is that if we're going to solve the world's problems, if we're going to solve our personal problems, our most intimate problems with our families and our children and our loved ones, if we're going to solve those problems, we have to get underneath the narrative layer, underneath that internal dialogue, and to the experiential layer, and to the layer that's selecting the confirmation bias mechanism that is selecting our experience over and over again, so that indeed we have the same problems day after day, year after year. We have to get to the experiential level. And for years, that's why I was calling myself, my background is in psychotherapy and training psychotherapists, and articulating the mechanisms of how that works and how you apply that in your practice. And what I discovered out of that is that there's a layer of what's really happening in all those kinds of contexts where people's experience and minds and hearts are being changed, is that the experiential level is what's being affected. There's anyway, what I was going to say is that I for years I was calling myself an experienced engineer, and still like that term, because it's the structure of the experience underneath what we think and how things occur to us that we really have to get towards. We really have to develop the insight and awareness to realize how confirmation bias and experience repetition is keeping the world, holding the world back to evolve at really snail space.